cat people. Dan the Catman here, along with Michelle the Meow Maven. Hi, Michelle. And Stephen Plant from catbehaviorhelp.com. That's catbehaviorhelp.com. Stephen is our resident cat behavior expert and our producer. And possibly my fashion consultant in the future, because I should probably get the clothes.
Glad to be here, Dan.
Because he said to me, "Are you wearing that sweatshirt again, Dan?" And I said, "Yes, because I don't care what I look like. It's about the cats." And joining us today is Terri Grow of terrigrow.com. Terri is a pet sage, feline nutritionist, and animal expert. I just like saying pet sage. But before we get to talk to Terri and learn all about her, Michelle has a special announcement that she gets to read again. Thank you, Michelle. Take it away.
I sure do, Dan. Shelter Cats podcast has joined the Chewy Shelter and Rescue It affiliate. Oh my God. I gotta go back again. We'll fix that.
We're not starting again.
I'll make sure Jake takes that. The Shelter Cats podcast has joined the Chewy Shelter and Rescue affiliate program. Chewy's mission is to be the most trusted and convenient online destination for pet parents and partners everywhere. Chewy is passionate about supporting animals and making a positive impact in communities across the country. Local shelters and rescues oftentimes serve as a first home or provide continued support to pets. That's why Chewy is committed to supporting organizations that benefit the overall health, safety, and well-being of shelter and rescue animals. Please click the link in the podcast description. You'll not only be helping your local shelter, you'll also help support the podcast. So thanks to Chewy.
I love Chewy.
Thank you, Chewy.
Dan, could I even tell a very quick Chewy story just in support of that company?
Please.
I ordered a huge amount of food to come up to us on vacation in Maine once. I mean, a couple $100 worth of stuff. And I accidentally shipped it to our New York address, and I called Chewy, and they said, "Oh, just keep it and donate it to a shelter."
Oh my gosh!
Which is exactly what I did.
Yeah.
Wow.
Chewy is they're just amazing. Even with the Happy Cat Sanctuary disaster, which just happened, they were the first organization that I reached out to, and they were within minutes. They said, "Yeah, whatever they need, we'll donate to them. We're happy to help." So Chewy's just amazing. They're just so supportive of rescues and shelters. They really, really are.
Not to mention, Dan, when if you have a cat that has something that or pet that you order through Chewy, if the cat or the animal passes away, what did they do for you, Dan?
That's right. I lost my Sophie in November to cancer, and they sent me flowers.
Yep.
Which, fun fact, is the first time anyone has ever sent me flowers in my life. It's from Chewy. So with that being said, because it's my podcast before anyone else, I get to be selfish and ask the first question to Terri related to, it's a nutrition and behavior type of question. So all my cats are rescues, otherwise, I'd be tarred and feathered. And my oldest cat, Taylor, is a ACC rescue, so shout out to ACC. And he has a very strange habit that I wanted to pick your brain about, Terri, and Stephen as well. So I have dry food bowls throughout the house for them to graze during the day, which, you guys may have an opinion on in and of itself. But Taylor does this thing with the dry food where he won't just eat it out of the bowl like the rest of my cats. He will use his paw, take the food out of the bowl. This is only for dry food, not wet food. He will scoop the dry food out of the bowl and eat it off the floor in front of the bowl. So then he'll leave food. There's always food in front of the bowl, and this isn't one specific bowl. He does this throughout the house. They're different size bowls. Some are a little taller, some are a little narrower. He doesn't eat from the same bowl. Wherever he wants to have dry food, he has to take it out and put it on the floor. Otherwise, he won't eat the dry food. Is there any reason why he might want to do that other than to be unique?
Dan, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but a couple of things that I would think about, as you mentioned, was it the different bowls? As I said, I do think bowl shapes and sizes make a difference with their whiskers, whether they can actually see over the bowl. One of the things that I'm curious about, especially if it's only dry food, is there a dust factor that if he sticks his muzzle in, that he's actually might be inhaling, and then he gets away from it using his paw as well? Because there is a lot of, as you know, flavorings, powders added to dry food. Is there an issue there that might be part of it? Dan, your comment on behavior? I mean,
On behavior?
yeah, Dan, any thoughts that you might have on behavior regarding that issue? Or Stephen?
Well, sure. Like, it's possible that he is playing with his food, and we know that cats are predators. They play often with the mice before they kill them.
Right.
And there is some thought that they do that to tire the mouse out, so that there's a lesser risk of being bit by the mouse, lesser risk of disease transmission. The mouse finally kind of gets really tired, and then
Right.
they finish the mouse off. So it might be in some way connected to boredom and interest and curiosity and play.
So that's interesting, Stephen, because I was going to mention, Dan wanted to ask about his cat with the food. Monchichi, my kitten that I got last year, she doesn't pull the food out to eat it like Dan's cat does. She flips it out of the bowl every single morning and evening, if I've cleaned it up in between. My kitchen floor is covered with kibble. It's like walking it's like landmines all over and it just covered. And she doesn't do that to eat it. She'll eat it out of the bowl, and then she'll also eat it off the floor, but then she plays with it on the floor. I find it under my floor mat. I find it all over the place in the kitchen.
Yeah, it may be a lot of fun, but maybe Terri wants to speak to the very notion of dry food, and the kind of, there's no kibble bush, right? And there's no bush in nature where kibbles are growing like berries, right?
I knew I was gonna get crap for this.
I just don't like using dry food as a steady diet. As a treat, I'm fine with it. As grazing, the concept that came out years ago that cats will graze, the problem with having food out all the time and the palatants that they add to get cats to eat their food are addictive. So you're actually setting them up to eat more and more food. We end up with overweight cats. And it's because they're so dense in calories that we've got two things going against them. It's addictive, and it is usually about 3 times the calorie count than normal the same amount of canned food. I've actually measured where I've taken 3 ounces of this and 3 ounces of this, and the calories are 3 times the amount. So I always try to tell people, get rid of your dry food crunchies all over your floor. Just eliminate the dry food and use it as a treat. Put it in a ball or a puzzle toy so that they actually have to work for it. It's, as Stephen was saying, make them work for that. It tire themselves out. It's not just tiring the mouse, but trying the cat and using their brain activity as well. So I understand the principle behind dry food, the whole theory. I've actually tried to trace it back of why grazing was, leaving the bowls out. And everybody keeps coming back to me saying, well, they eat 9 or 10 times a day, so we just leave it out all the time. They're recommended to leave it. You're setting your cat for weight. Yeah, you're setting your cat up for weight issues. And they really do need a cycle. So they eat, let it digest, eat, let it digest, instead of nibbling. I mean, if I've got chocolate-covered peanuts sitting on a tray all day, I'm munching on them all the time. So it's the same principle. So my lecture for dry food.
The audience may not fully appreciate that caloric difference, in the sense that if you added enough dry food to equal the weight of a can of cat food, you would have a ton of dry food, because the wet food has a lot of water in it. If you squeezed all that water out, you would have a lot less food, a lot less calories.
Right.
Well, if you look at it, I mean, any dry food is typically 10% moisture. Your canned food is around 80% moisture. That's significant different. And cats, as I love this statement that I saw it the other day, cats eat their water. They actually absorb more water in their food. It goes to more of a cellular level. With them just drinking with their tongue, they don't absorb as well. They don't get as much moisture and drinking like they would normally.
Well, that's interesting.
That's very interesting. So
Yeah.
I want to take a step back. And
Yes.
what led you to go into this specific field of being a pet sage, I get to say it again, and a feline nutritionist? What led you down that path? Because that I would like to know.
It all started with a drive. My husband and I were driving back with Florida motorhome, traveling with our 4 cats and 1 dog. And I had a cat at that time that had upper respiratory issues. And I began to look at herbs and how to treat herbs because antibiotics weren't doing the job. And I started a store. The name of it is Pet Sage, was Pet Sage. And that was 30 years ago. So I launched one of the first holistic pet stores in the U.S. People don't realize that.
Wow.
And I shipped to, I think I just figured out about 30 countries, products around the world, most states. And I became certified in Chinese herbs. And then I began to be more involved with cat nutrition. I was probably one of the first stores to discontinue dry food except for 1 or 2 brands to prevent. And so I could actually talk to clients about the benefits of wet versus dry. So when I closed the store during COVID, I got my certification. I had been following nutrition and working in nutrition for a number of years, studying along veterinarians as well. And then I got my certification. And cats and feline nutrition is so far behind dog nutrition. And my passion is working with cats. I put it together, and I now do lectures on feline nutrition through a school out of Australia, the College of Integrative Veterinary Therapies. And actually, I'm excited. In a week, I think I was mentioning I'll be giving a lecture on how we need feline-specific supplements. So I'm really trying to be an advocate for our feline species.
And it sounds like it's very, very much needed. So that's
so.
And you would think that
Does that help?
related companies.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So that leads us into like cat food in general, and there's so many different brands, and there's so many different varieties, and there's so many different. All the vets that I've dealt with all have different advice on what to give them, what not to give them. This girl Sophie had a sensitive stomach issue where she would scarf and barf, if I may be so gross. And her vet recommended a raised food bowl and sensitive stomach food and all these different things. So can you demystify cat food in terms of what are good brands, what are bad brands? It sounds like there's a lot of misconceptions on what we should be feeding their cats. Right off the bat, you said, I got the impression I probably shouldn't have so many dry food bowls throughout the house.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, in your 30 years, what should we be doing versus what should we not be doing overall?
And that includes what's reality as well. I mean, one of the continuums that I try to help clients understand is that if we could feed fresh, live prey that has been raised organically, that would be the ultimate. But that's not reality. So what can we do to get as close as that within our budgets? I recognize budgets are a huge issue versus at the bottom end, are we not feeding our cats what their bodies really need? And that's what it really comes down to. One of the problems is we keep hearing this term, obligate carnivore, and yet you look at all of these foods, and what that means for people that don't understand, that means they must get nutrients from meat, animal tissue. What they try to do then is use as little meat as possible and substitute plant proteins, rendered meats, to try to get as many from what we call a reductionist, meaning vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, versus the whole matrix of food. And the goal really is understanding that the cat's bodies need not just protein and taurine, because we hear a lot of this saying, oh, this has got extra protein and taurine. It's what's all the amino acids, all of those essential amino acids versus the non-essential that the pet food companies don't really even look at. So it's a challenge to step and say, your cat needs meat because it's expensive, and how can we complement foods to get the best bang for your buck is the easiest way. I mean, one of the things that when I try to chat with people is to say, remember, the pet food industry came out of agribusiness. It came out of leftovers from the human industry. Leftover ingredients back after the Industrial Revolution was lots of grains. So they figured a way to use that. Interestingly, in Europe, UK in particular, they have the foods back then were very feline specific. Somehow the US took over. Dry food has to have carbohydrates in it to actually shape that. It's changed a little bit with manufacturing techniques, but to really get those meats and things to stick together, you have to have starches. And so most kibble is at least twice the amount of carbohydrates that cats really need. If a cat chooses, they will actually choose foods that are mid 50% protein and maybe only 10 or 12% carbohydrates. And most dry foods have 25% to even up to 50% carbohydrates in them. And what that means for your kitty, although they keep trying to argue that is higher sugars for your cat, weight, the cats actually can't handle it, so it ends up, they can actually have like a sugar bolus if they eat too many carbohydrates, because their bodies can't recognize sugar, or I should say they can't taste sugar. And then they don't know what to do with it, so their body just shoves it aside and makes it fat. So yes, cats can, there's enough studies to say cats can handle carbohydrates. They can actually digest, I think it's about 45% carbohydrates. When you get up to about 40%, it's causing GI issues. But nobody recognizes that, and nobody promotes that. So my thing that I try to explain to people, look for the foods that have the most meat protein, the lowest amount of carbohydrates, and use your dry foods as treats so that you are actually give them, think about it, in the wild, they're going to eat mice, baby rabbits, birds. Those might have 2 to 4% carbohydrate in them. Does that help? I can go on about this.
and in fact, if you think about it, the mouse, the carbohydrates that the mouse contributes are the partially digested stomach contents. Gross as that sounds, cats lack amylase in their saliva, so the breaking down of plant material and carbohydrates is difficult. So they actually rely on the mouse to do some of the work for them. And if you're getting all these carbs and other non-useful ingredients in your food, you're paying for those ingredients that are not helping your cat, and your cat's putting on weight for calories that serve no purpose.
Correct. It's empty calories is a good way to put it. One of the fascinating things that I've been looking into is really what happens, everybody talks about fiber for constipation or how many things in using plant materials. If you think about it, fur is the biggest fiber content for cats. And we just haven't figured out a way to mimic fur in for our cats. So all of a sudden you're getting fiber, or they have fiber in their bodies that's fermenting and creating more problems as well. So it's kind of a domino effect all the way.
So we should be looking at the protein content in the cat food. Why are so many cat foods fish related then?
Because particularly tuna there is an amino acid that cats, or I should say a chemical that cats are very reactive to, and it's a flavorant is for the main reason. It's also a very palatable protein for cats. So, and some cats do very well with it. And one of the things I kind of look at is if you look at cats, let's say the Maine Coon or the cats that have lived near the waters, how they survive, did they eat more fish? And some do very well on it versus your, let's say, rodents or something along those lines. But fish typically is used as a flavor enhancer. Remember, pet manufacturers want to sell you their food, so they have to find a way to get your cat to eat it, and that's one of the ways that they will do it. But they will also use other chemical flavoring agents as well.
So in a perfect world, I should just have a lot of mice running around my house so that they could hunt them. That literally just popped in my head as I was listening to that, which is actually not a totally awful idea. I would give them something to do while I'm working.
Well, I haven't gone to that. I know people that have fed live prey. I've not been able to it. I actually have my yard set up that my cats can hunt. This year they're a little restricted though. So one of the fascinating tips on this that I learned is when they're hunting, the end of their canines actually have sensors in it. So when they catch prey, they know how much pressure to actually apply to hold the prey and not. I have one cat that had to have a full dental removal when he was 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
He cannot tell that. He actually will end up crushing. I thought it was fascinating once I learned this. He'll actually crush the little critter, where the other one will actually catch it, protect it, and I can get him to release it. So remember, their bodies are amazing hunting machines. And Stephen will tell you, activity, behavior-wise, that needs to be really recognized and supported.
And I believe that cats actually have also a tooth or a top and a bottom towards the back that is perfectly suited to, I know this is a kind of slightly gross topic, but it is food. They're perfectly suited to break the spine of the mouse. It fits right in like a lock and a key.
Yeah.
They evolve together. You know?
Well, remember, cats
for mice.
Cats don't have any lateral movement. They can't chew that way. Their teeth are designed to shear, just what you just said, to break bones, to shear meat. Same with their tongue. Their tongue is designed to actually pull fur off, and they will turn the mouse around to go down the throat a certain way so it doesn't barb them going down.
Right, exactly. It's definitely head first. And if you've ever seen a cat throw up some recently eaten dry food, you will often see that the kibble is intact. They're not actually chewing it. And when people say, oh, my cat has no teeth, I'm told not to feed dry food. Well, no, I've had a toothless cat that loved dry food and wet food. Yeah. But they just eat it. They just swallow it.
They swallow everything whole.
Taylor's has lost a lot of teeth because he's 15, and same thing. He eats dry food, treats. Don't hate me, Terry, because I said treat. And she, Sophie, if we're being gross, barfed a lot. And what Stephen just said actually was very true. The dry food was always, it almost looked like you could put it right back. It was always fascinating to me. I never did that. But,
there is a tension sometimes in terms of what we want someone to feed their cat and what they are able to feed their cat. And I think Terri and I both understand that in some cases and in some respects, the best food for your cat is the food that they'll eat.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you buy this really great organic, whatever it is, and it's super special and they don't eat it, then they're not getting the benefit of it. Dan, before I forget, I just want to mention, at least in New York City right now, there is a very strong warning to cat owners not to feed raw food of any kind because of bird flu. There have been some cases of bird flu.
Yes, and here's the challenge because there's still a lot of lack of information, unfortunately. And my understanding with poultry is the big one, that we actually have to cook poultry to 165 degrees. So if I work with somebody who's been doing a raw food diet, I'll talk with them how to prepare the food a different way. Other meats are still not implicated. Now, beef we have to be a little careful of because dairy beef does get in the human food supply. But pork, goat, lamb, those I understand are still safe to feed raw. And I do advocate for my clients to offer that as raw foods. Personally, I am doing at least pork with raw food. I will cook any sort of poultry and then add my supplements to make a homemade food.
Terri, if you had a client who wanted to feed undercooked chicken, absent the bird flu situation, there's actually a way to do it safely.
Yeah.
If you've ever heard of cooking sous vide, which is in a warm water bath.
Oh yeah,
FDA, right. Mm-hmm. So the FDA table on safety with respect to chicken, it's not just a one thing, 165 and we're done. It's a time temperature relationship. So chicken that's cooked to 130 degrees for an hour will kill bacteria, will kill E. coli just as effectively as 165 does on contact. And there's a chart that they have that shows you how much time at what temperature to get E. coli dead.
That's interesting because I actually have a client that I've been working with for the last year. She had a kitten at that age. He was 16 weeks, and she wanted sous vide recipes. So we actually created sous vide recipes. She is up to, I think, 25 or 30 recipes. This woman's amazing. I wish I had her skills on it. And we did a whole series, and she came back with her charts, and she was rather concerned about how cooking up to a higher temperature. So I will look at the USDA to see if we can, because she was very upset not being able to maintain a lot of the sous vide processing.
Because there definitely is an FDA chart on the time temperature relationship with chicken.
Okay, excellent.
I might even look for it while we're talking.
Okay.
Terri, you mentioned
yes.
Terri, you mentioned raw food diet. I'm more familiar with raw food. I'm going off script, Stephen. Don't kill me. I'm more familiar with raw food for dogs. In fact, one of my friends had a Shih Tzu that she fed him a raw diet exclusively. In fact, he loved broccoli. For some reason, he was obsessed with broccoli. I don't know enough about, and chime in anytime, you guys. I don't know enough about raw food diets for cats. It sounds like that's something you advocate. Am I correct? Then can you go into a little bit about like what a raw food diet for a cat would be? Because that made me very curious.
Raw food diets basically for cats is trying to mimic what they would eat in the wild. It uses meat protein, fats, organ meats. Sometimes there might be a little bit of vegetables on there, and they use those for fiber instead of carbohydrates. Understand that the raw food diet is what the cat's body is really designed to eat. Their stomach pH is very hostile to bacteria. And so most cats do extremely well with a raw food diet. You have to be careful with immune systems, both the human and the animal. But even cats with cancer, We will use raw food diets, especially if some of the commercial versions are either sous vide version. There are a few companies that are doing sous vide, or HPP, which is high pressure pasteurization, so that they're reducing pathogens. One of the biggest areas that I advocate raw food, yes, I am an advocate. It's not for everyone and it's not for every household, but I do feel if we can get some fresh foods, and that can be gently cooked, because there is minimal destruction of nutrients when you do, especially as Stephen said, the sous vide or gently cooking something, you still maintain those nutrients. Remember, kibble is highly processed, so you're introducing other things within, even canned foods. You're introducing other manufacturing ingredients, additives to make those foods very enticing to cats. But it can take a while for a cat to either get used to raw. Remember, it doesn't smell like the canned foods. But the benefits, and it doesn't have to be only raw food. If you do even 20% fresh foods, you can significantly improve your cat's immune system, just a range of issues. So one of the biggest areas that I will actually advocate is hyperthyroidism. Hyperthyroidism does extremely well and can be helpfully. I have had 1 or 2 cats maintain hyperthyroid just on raw food diets because it is not processed. So their bodies are using, and we'll also I'll pull in some Chinese medicine theories where we're using the energetics of food. So we might use a food that's very cold, like rabbit, to get that inflammation down. Same thing with IBD. I've used IBD a lot with cats because I really feel reduces the inflammation. It's better for their digestion. Yes, I'm a huge advocate of raw food diets. Does that help?
Yes, and you work with clients in terms of setting up a diet for cats. Do companies make raw food for cats?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you have to do that yourself?
No. There's actually some really excellent raw food companies out there now that make raw food or gently cooked food so that you are feeding fresh food. Even freeze-dried raw, I would encourage people to use instead of kibble. I do it all the time. The freeze-dried is minimally processed. You're getting more meat protein, more fats. Remember, your cat's body is designed to run on protein and fat. So you're getting more of a natural diet with freeze-dried. And there are terrific freeze-dried diets, even recognizing the avian flu issue on some of these. We have to be very careful of. One of the things that they're looking at now is freeze-drying alone may not be protective of avian, but there is often a heat step. And so we're trying to find out which companies are adding the heat step as well, as minimal heat with the freeze drying to make the freeze dried food safe for cats with the avian flu.
And I'm curious if Terri, if you like Stella and Chewy's, because I know that they do pressure sterilization on their food.
This goes to what you said earlier. If cats eat it, fine. I personally have an issue with some of the ingredients that they add to their foods. Sodium phosphate is one that they do use in a number of their foods. They use it for a taste enhancer. It is probably one of the most dangerous inorganic phosphates to use with our cats. There have been studies to show that it causes kidney damage within 4 weeks. So,
wow.
It was a study out of Germany 4 years ago, I think. So I caution, I'm not saying don't use it. Make sure that you rotate it with some other foods.
Is that an ingredient? Is sodium phosphate an ingredient on the label that consumers can see?
Yep. And it really can make a difference up where it is on the ingredient label. You know, it can be higher. I'd stay away from that. Lower, then you rotate it. You know, try calcium phosphate, also an inorganic, but it is known to be the lesser of evils. That's why you see it so often in so many canned foods.
One thing, sorry.
Go ahead.
One thing I was going to say that's, I think, super important that we haven't actually mentioned yet, which is that cats metabolize protein for energy. Humans don't under most conditions. We metabolize fat and carbs. Unless we're starving on a life raft in the Pacific,
right.
we will consume muscle to provide energy. But cats actually derive their energy source from protein.
They can actually create glucose from protein. So the whole concept that they have to have carbohydrates for glucose, not so much. So that's, one of the things too is the cats, they can metabolize all this protein, where in humans, if it ferments, it causes cancer and blah, blah, blah. They don't show that in cats at all. Their bodies are designed to run on protein and fats, and how they use protein is significant. And yet carbohydrates are used by most formulators for that glucose that they don't need. Or I should say excess glucose. Sorry. I have to be careful here.
No, we can edit anything. It sounds to me like, and I'm guilty of this, it sounds like we're not paying enough attention to the labels of the foods we're getting for cats. My mother was always guilty of getting whatever was on sale. There are so many different types of food labels. There's something called AFCO food labels. Can you speak a little about, should we be, obviously this is a dumb question, we should be paying a lot more attention to the labels of what we're getting in the regular stores we go to?
Well, there's a couple of things. I personally think that one of the biggest things is education, what the cat really needs to eat. Everybody promotes this beautiful scenery, how they're carnivores in the television commercials, and yet they're still adding these foods that are 20%, 40% carbohydrates. So we need to really be able to understand how to look at what ingredients, meat ingredients. I am not a fan of using legumes for proteins. They are not a complete protein, and a lot of people don't understand that. Meats are a complete protein for cats. They add all the amino acids. With humans, beans, well, certain ones can be complete, but for cats, beans, peas, as protein, they are not complete proteins for cats. So then you have to turn around and add things. So when you see a label that says really high protein, make sure you know what type of protein that is, because you may see chicken, and then you see peas, and then you might see pea protein, etc., and down the line. So it's really understanding what your cat needs, what they will thrive on. A cat will survive on some of these foods, but we want our cats to thrive and be healthy, and it's possible. So, yes, you want your foods to be, by state, AFCO is the main honestly, I can't tell you right now because I'm not sure what's going on with FDA, AFCO, or anything when it comes to our labeling. And they are looking at changing our labels because people have said that they are concerned and they felt that the current labels are too difficult to read. I mean, even if you look at it, they'll tell you what the moisture is, what the protein is, and what the fat is. They don't tell you what the carbohydrates are because they don't have to. So there is a way to calculate it, though, roughly. So, and the same thing between dry and canned food. I have clients that don't understand, well, this bag of dry food says that it's 40% protein, but the canned cat food says it's only 8%. What do I do? Well, the difference is what we were talking earlier, is you have to calculate the moisture to actually get to the protein level that is really in that, getting to what the dry matter content is. So yes, to answer your question, I don't think it's just, it is being more informed about label, but it's really understanding what your cat really needs to eat. They are not vegetarians. They are not omnivores. They are carnivores. And that is a challenge for us in a number of cat foods, because rice, sorghum, millet, all of those are less expensive than good meat proteins.
There are different types of AAFCO labels, and some of them say the food was actually tested to meet an AAFCO standard, and others say formulated to meet. We're doing what we think we need to do to meet the standard, but we're not actually submitting the food for testing. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
And what exactly is AAFCO? Can you explain what that is for those of us?
Association of American Feed Control Officials. I think that's what the title is. Okay. and it's by state. That's not a federal. Each one is state, and it can vary what each state will allow. So poor food manufacturers have to do I think even still, they have to be very careful of their labels going into certain states.
A guy I know who used to work for a major food manufacturer for cats went on a rant with me about this particular food because they didn't change any of the ingredients. The label remained exactly the same, but as an insider in his company, he knew that the quality of those ingredients was going down, but the label never changed. So you never saw it. It was the quality of these different ingredients.
That has been a huge issue, and it can make the difference of whether your cat can use this food or not, because especially when it comes to meals, you see chicken meal or turkey meal, poultry meal, they can have different grades. So it can be grade B, grade C, and that may make the difference of the level of minerals. So if they go to a food that has higher minerals, your cat may have a chance end up with urinary blockage because not being able to eliminate all of that. So it really does make a difference, and they don't have to tell you the difference of the great ingredients that they're doing.
Can you speak, Terri, a little bit? And I know, Dan, I'm taking, I'm just directing some questions, but I have to ask this. Can you talk about bioavailability and the quality of proteins with respect to how much actually gets digested and becomes available to the cat, and that the idea that you might need to eat less food if the quality was higher because the bioavailability was higher?
That is a big issue, and digestibility of food, and a lot of foods don't test the digestibility. Higher meat proteins, you're going to get digestibility of around probably 90% or even higher, where, let's say, legumes, it might be 70 to 80%. So you're going to have to eat more, you're going to have more volume, and then less nutrients going into the system. So
now I have a question about
go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
Well, the grading that you were saying before, as far as the grade A, grade B, did I hear that correctly, where that is not something that's communicated on the label at the moment, but is that one of the things that they're looking to change about the label, or is it?
No, not that I'm aware of. And this is kind of not my area, but my understanding, no. That is a hidden secret.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've talked before. I have one of my cats. She's on special urinary tract care wet food and kibble as well, but wet food primarily. And she loves it. I give it to both of my cats. They both love it. They have no problem. But every once in a while, there'll be a couple of cans in a row. They just won't eat. They just won't eat. And then I'll get another can out of the same box, out of the same shipment that I got, all from Chewy. And then they'll eat it fine. And it'll be weeks and everything is fine. And then all of a sudden there's like a couple of cans that they just won't eat again. And I'm just wondering if maybe, is it possible that they're coming from different facilities, that maybe there was a batch that might have had, a lower grade that makes it less appealing to them, or what do you think might be the cause of something like that?
I doubt that it's a lower grade issue. I have a feeling it might be different plants, but you can always look. On the bottom of the can, it tells you the batch, the time it was made. You can always compare that so that you see where it was. I will tell you from when I had the store, I had clients come in and say, my cat won't eat this batch. And they would go back and hunt through and find batches that the cat, because they are made in different plants. Wellness was a brand that was really known. Smaller cans are made in one facility. Larger cans are often made in another facility. So that can make a huge difference when, and remember, canned foods are cooked in the cans. So if you got a little can, it's called retorting, and they actually seal it, and then it's cooked in a water bath. So it's cooked in the can. So think about little mini crock pots. It's going to taste different in this can versus the big tall cans. It's going to taste different. So
that is fascinating. I never even conceptualized that as a possibility. Like I just figured, it's like when you watch like these things about how candy is made. It's made in a big vat and then it's dumped into the jars or with the packaging, and then the packaging is sealed. I just kind of. That is nuts.
Well, it's all mixed. It is mixed all in a big vat, and then it's put into the cans, sealed, then put in a water bath to cook.
Huh.
It's almost like sous vide, but at the higher temperature.
Yeah.
And
that's the difference. Some of your manufacturers.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say that makes a difference.
It's Zoom. It's what it does. I was just going to say, I had a cat long ago who was very picky, and one day he refused to eat his wet food, and I sent samples into the company. I sent them a few cans, and they got back to me and they said this shipment, this batch, was made at a different plant, not to the standards of our company, and it was actually not done correctly.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Felix knew it.
They do.
The more
I will share a story with you. And this is probably well before your time when it comes to the food industry. We had a chocolate lab. She was a puppy, actually an older puppy, and I was feeding a particular food at that time. Went and got a new bag. She flat out refused it. Got a new bag, or kept trying to feed it, toss it. She'd eat. Went and got samples, tried the same thing. That food actually was found out later to have aflatoxins and killed a number of dogs across the U.S. So trust your animal. Yeah.
Wow.
She was. So I've learned. Pay attention here. Yeah.
My God in heaven. My God. Thank you for that.
I'm still blown away. I'm still processing that they're all cooked in the cans. I'm like, no, I'm not quite past that just yet.
Well, I find it interesting because a lot of people assume that canned food is raw. It is not. All canned food is cooked. But the difference is some plants, like you were saying, Stephen, are cooked at much higher temperatures because of the volume they're pushing through versus other companies' smaller temperatures. So that's one of the differences.
This might be also a silly question. So obviously there's two basic types of canned food. There's basically the chunks and gravy, and then there's the pate. Pate, I think, looks pretty clear. It's blended. It's ground up. It is what it is. The chunks, is that also like kind of the way you were describing the kibble before, where it's made into this slurry and then it's baked in a certain way? Are the chunks and gravy also something like that, where it's like this kind of like and they always used to accuse McDonald's of this, right? They made like a meat slurry and then reformulated it into a patty. Is it the same type of thing for the wet food? Like, is it reformulated into these little squares and cubes, or?
Very good question.
Yes.
Okay.
When it comes to the shreds, you're looking at real meat. But when you're looking at those nice, sweet little, little chunks or squares or little forms, yes, that is basically pate food formulated and then made into little shapes. A little tip for you too. Canned foods are typically higher in fat. So if you've got somebody that needs to gain some weight, oh, somebody's visiting here.
You've got a tail behind you.
I observe my litter box all day. Sorry.
Yours is the cat.
Pate foods are typically your meat, protein, and higher fat, where your shred foods, your thinner gravies, higher meat protein, leaner. But when you get into those really nice gravies and they're kind of really, everybody wants to just lick the gravy, higher in carbohydrates. So just different way to look at things. What? Yeah. They'll use a little more of that sweet gravy, a little
so
higher carbohydrates.
Those like the churros and like the push-up pops, those lickable treats and all those things, that would fall under that description as well?
No, those like churros, I'm a fan of 2 of those. Some of the others, yes, are higher in carbohydrates. Churro in particular is higher meat protein. They're about 70% protein. So, yeah.
Oh, thank God, my guys love the churros.
Yeah.
Stephen, I know you wanted to ask. I'm sorry, you were saying.
No, and they are of churro. Bless them. It is the original churro, has no carrageenan. Most of the rest of their products have carrageenan, so be very careful with those. And for those who don't know what carrageenan, churros, carrageenan is very hard on the cat's stomach, so in their digestive tract.
And that you could see on the label. Okay. Now, Stephen, I know you had a question, so I'm setting you up.
Okay, so and before I ask my question, I have a sub question, because I think a lot of people, a lot of cat parents have this question at the ready, which has to do with the subject of unconventional treats. As an example, Jenny, my blind from birth girl, I give her teeny quantities of peanut butter. I mean, we're talking about, the head of a pen, right? Not even this much, just like a smear. And she loves it. Am I doing something wrong?
No. If she does well with it, she likes it. I'm all for treats. I've had cats that like asparagus tips. I've had cats that like Cheetos.
Cheetos. There's a thing about Cheetos with cats. I don't know.
I had one of those Planters cheese balls. I had a cat that loved Planters cheese balls. I know exactly what you mean.
Dan, this is the section you're going to have to black out, because we shouldn't be talking about it, right?
No, I don't want people to feel, I think everybody can have odd little things that they can do special to their cat, just not in excess, We don't eat bags and bags of Cheetos, or we shouldn't.
Well,
but,
speak for yourself, Terry.
Depends on my
Trust
mood.
me, I know.
Cheetos, but it's
I know.
I had a cat once who liked yogurt, and I would give her little bits of yogurt, and plain yogurt.
I am a huge fan of using yogurt.
Interesting.
They say cats aren't they are lactose intolerant, but yogurt is great for cats, in my opinion. And if they have a cat, try goat yogurt instead of milk, cow's milk yogurt. Just be careful of the sugars. Greek yogurt is probably one of the best ones to use. I will use that. I will even use, if you've got a cat with pills.
I was going to say, is lactose only in cow milk?
Sorry?
Is lactose
what about goat's
only
milk?
in cow milk? Is goat's milk free of lactose?
Yes. As far as I know, yes. Yes. That's why they use like gout, and they have really high in probiotics. So that's why you see a lot of frozen goat milks, really great for cats, restoring guts, helping that way. And let me, since I mentioned guts and microbiome, let me add a little personal pet peeve here. I am a huge fan of using prebiotics, but use one is just for cats. Remember, probiotics are based on what the diet is. So if you've got a cat who's a carnivore, using one And there are a few that I'm okay with, but many of them that the veterinarians prescribe are for cats and dogs and much too high in some of the probiotic strains that can be problematic for cats.
So one of the most commonly, I think, well-known probiotics for cats is Fortiflora. And Purina also now makes a prebiotic I think it's a combination prebiotic and probiotic product. Any thoughts on Fortiflora and that related prebiotic product?
I'm fine with those.
It speaks to the issue. Go ahead.
In my experience, there are probiotics. The Fortiflora in particular is great to help with appetites and help stimulate appetites and help with the gut. I think there are other probiotics that might be a little more beneficial at certain times. Don't want to say anything against, because Purina's been around a long time and we have to appreciate what they do. And the Fortiflora, as well as some of the others, I've even used, they have the calming one for cats. I've even recommended that one.
So the question that Dan was setting me up for was about inflammatory bowel disease, because I've had a cat who had it. I have a cat now who has it. I only recently learned that prescription cat food is not actually prescribed. It's controlled in some manner, but it's not a prescription. And there are a lot of people out there who have cats who have IBD. And if you could say the things that you think are most important to know about this, I'd be happy to hear it.
I do work with a number of cats with IBD. One of the biggest things I think is getting them on a species appropriate diet and really looking at what meats and having their food digest and ferment well within their gut. We also use a lot of herbal therapies to help control the inflammation so that we can support and prevent the IBD going into leaky gut and then creating more problems systemically throughout the body.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just said my cat Cricket had a leaky gut situation that almost killed her a couple years ago. She had sepsis because of bacteria that came out of her intestine and caused her to be hospitalized for 4 days. So
guys, I can't hear you.
That was very touch and go. And we made changes to her diet as a result of that.
I'm sorry, repeat that because it froze on me.
Sorry, I just said that my cat Cricket had leaky gut. She had a sepsis and spent 4 days in intensive care because of that. And we made changes to everything with respect to her after that.
Yes. Again, that goes back to what we are taught is okay for cats to eat. Just like us when we were younger, we can eat a lot of junk. As we age, we've got to protect our guts. And we also know setting our cats up early with better nutrition can also prevent from obesity, can prevent other gut issues as well. I understand dry food is a good option when it comes to making sure the cats and rescue cats have food to feed. But there are complications from that when you're setting a cat up. You've got young kittens, you're setting them up with foods that are not species appropriate, in my opinion, let me put it that way, that you've got something that might be triggering inflammation in the gut later in life. I think we really need to step back and say, what can we do for our kittens, for our rescue cats, to get healthier, more species-based, not only foods, but even supplements. I mean, that's a discussion I was next week or 2 weeks from now. They try to take, well, we have to understand originally, they took dog food that was being used and just resized it to try and made that cat food. This is back in the 50s and 60s until they went, oh, wait, we need taurine. And before they changed it, after 10 years, tens of thousands of cats died. So we have to really look at who our cat is and how can we step up the nutrition. And it's really just helping with education, I think, you know. I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but
it's worth repeating.
Do we think that cats who live entirely outside don't show IBD? Is IBD a human inside cat issue?
I think it's much higher in inside cats. I don't know if any feral cats have really been tested for this. And that's part of the problem. I was just reading a paper this morning on aging population and cognitive issues in cats. And they keep every paragraph. Well, there aren't enough studies to support it in cats. We know it in dogs and we know it in humans, but aren't enough studies for cats. Aren't enough studies for cats. Cat nutrition is decades behind in many ways. So we don't know if, you know, can we look at feral cats in areas that are getting their nutrition from prey? I don't know. One of the interesting things that in some of the studies that in papers that I've been working on is if you look at, there was actually a paper out of England. They said that if we look at cats' prey, like mice and rodents, their natural omega-3 balance is what we want, which is 2-to-1, a good anti-inflammatory ratio. But in our pet foods, AFCO allows it up to 30-to-1.
Wow.
So
that's a dramatic difference. That's crazy.
I know.
Wow.
So, and part of that comes from what chickens are fed, what other ingredients, the plant proteins, this fish oil. I discovered recently sunflower oil, which is used a lot and we assume is a really nice oil, causes GI issues in cats. And how many cat foods have sunflower oil in them?
Actually, I don't know. Can you answer that one? I actually honestly don't know.
Some of the better brands use sunflower oil because they think it's a good oil, but it's a seed oil. Once it's cooked, it can be problematic.
Interesting. My God. So, which leads me to my next question. Grain-free. Yeah. Is grain-free matter at all? Because Sophie, why do I keep doing that? Sophie, who had the stomach issues, I was specifically told to feed her grain-free wet and dry food because that would help with her scarfing and barfing. Is grain-free a myth or not, in your opinion?
It depends on what you're calling grain-free. And that's where the problem begins. Grain-free doesn't always mean carbohydrate-free. When they first came out with grain-free foods, all they did was go from rice to potatoes or tapioca. Still carbohydrates. They're just not a grain. So then now we're using plant proteins, peas, proteins, because, that bumps the protein level and gets rid of the grain. I personally, if I'm going to do a diet for a cat and I need to reduce the protein, and that's a discussion that as a senior cat, unless there is a health issue, you don't have to reduce protein. I will use rice because it is the easiest thing and most bioavailable. Stephen comment, it is the most bioavailable for a cat to digest.
So what's the protein in pea? I thought pea was just a vegetable. Is pea a legume?
Yeah.
Oh.
Now,
right.
English peas, then it comes down to that. A lot of your pet foods use field peas, completely different than the peas that you're used to. Chickpeas is a huge legume that the pet food industry uses.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's not going to be as digestible. Although there was a dry food that came out a number of years ago that he was able to get diabetics using this food. It's no longer made. Using this food, he could get them off insulin. And it used chickpeas as one of the proteins. So, there's, just with our foods, I was actually looking at, I'm going to tell on myself here. I grew up in a household that Velveeta cheese, my father swore by it. And it's one of those comfort foods, and I'm really stressed. I'm like, and I picked up the label the other day, and I was reading all the ingredients, and about the fifth one was sodium phosphate, and I put it back down. So they're using these ingredients to make the textures of the food, and yet they are harming our cats, as well as the whole cooking process, creating the Maillard reaction, which is a whole nother issue too for cats. So it's, it really comes down to kind of using variety, not only in brands, but also textures and the type of food. So, use a canned food, vary the brand. Try to use as much freeze-dried or fresh raw foods or sous vide cooking as possible, so that your cat is mimicking what they're going to eat in the wild. They're not going to eat the same bird every night, every day. Their rotation. And the other cool thing about cats, when they're in their environment, they actually call them little environmentalists, because if a prey is starting to diminish, they'll lay off and eat something else so that prey can reproduce.
Interesting.
So they're smart little buggers.
They really are. I'm going to ask 2 more questions, because Terri, we could talk to you all day. I personally want to move in with you so that my cats eat better. So we're going to, this is more of a behavioral question about another one of my cats. So we're going to be a little less serious. Tucker is he's a shelter cat. He will bury his food if he doesn't like it. Mm-hmm. Again, so here's an example. Let's say this is the food bowl. Mm-hmm. He will flip the bowl over, or if he's eating somewhere, he will take something and cover the food bowl with it. I thought that meant he didn't like. He's occasionally picky. He will eat a certain thing, and then he'll get tired of it, and I'll have to vary the texture. Like you said, he'll go from pate to shreds and back again. I thought it meant that he was expressing dissatisfaction. And Stephen wants to laugh at me. I thought it meant dissatisfaction. And he's not the first cat I've had that's done that. Why do they cover the bowl, walk away, and not eat it, and give me a dirty look while doing that? Is there any behavioral reason for doing that, is what I want to know.
So, I'm going to jump in for a second, Dan, because you know what I would talk about, which is that there is the potential for doing what's called caching, which large species cats do, which is they bury their food for later. Mm-hmm. So it could be that. It might also be commentary on the cook.
That's what I thought. Because he didn't look at me. I'm not eating this shit. What is this?
When my cat, when Jenny doesn't want to eat one of my incredibly carefully prepared gourmet, layered souffles and protein sundae, right? She just doesn't eat it. She doesn't dig.
Okay.
But I'll let Terri put in her 2 cents.
I'm not sure I have an answer on this. I've had a cat that did it. One of my store cats. I had 3 cats that lived at the store, and one of them he would bury it. He would eat some, and then I think it was, I'll save this till later. It was actually he was kind of cute because he was a polydactyl, so it was kind of fun watching him do it.
Oh. He did it twice as fast.
I think there are a number of theories on this, and I just, part of me wonders if some of this was learned early on in some of these guys. I don't know. one of the things that I wanted to mention when it comes to foods, like you're talking about this cat not eating this, remember, our cats learn their taste often in utero. What their mother ate will affect their taste. What the mother eats once they're born and shows them food will make a big difference on that. So it is really critical, if you have a young cat, you do lots of rotations, different things, to prevent them from becoming fixated on a particular food. Because I guarantee... Sorry?
No. You finish up, please.
No, because I guarantee you that manufacturer is going to change that food.
I actually love that point of rotating the food, because I remember hearing, I don't know, years ago, that changing the food could possibly make a cat more fickle, that if you're changing it out. But I've actually done that often with my cats, where, so like I said, right now I have this special food that I order. I get it delivered, I don't know, it's every 3 weeks or every 4 weeks, something like that. But depending on who's eating and how much they're eating, sometimes I run out of it between getting, the next shipment. So I'll go to the store and I'll supplement with something else that I got in the store, and they eat it no problem. Sometimes I mix it in together, sometimes I don't. So like and prior to the special food, I would, I'm guilty of, not necessarily getting the cheapest, but kind of getting what was most affordable for me at the time. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to make the most sense at the time. So I would oftentimes switch out food. So I don't think I've ever been, at least with my current situation of cats, steady food, the exact same time. And I don't feel like it's created fickleness in them, but I remember hearing that. So every time I do switch out the food for a different brand, in the back of my head, I'm like, just be careful, be careful, be careful. So it's kind of a relief to know that in a way, switching it out is a good thing for them.
I'm going to add a couple of things to that. One of the things you might do, they're on food for urinary issues, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Take a look and see what they use. And I actually have a slide I might send Dan. What they use to make that acidic to reduce the struvite crystals. Yeah. That's what we're treating, correct?
Yes.
Do you know that high meat protein is acidic? Their natural diet is acidic. Yeah. Creates 4 urinary issues. So I try to, whenever you're going to buy a replacement food, look for the highest protein that you can get. Or you might even think about just having some herbs alongside so that you have that as complement to say, here, you're not creating a potential for further urinary issues. But then you can do a rotation a little more frequently and changing different things. And you're still treating potential urinary issues.
Right.
And wet food, with all that water, it's good for kidneys. It's good for flushing out things like crystals, and good for long-term health.
Yeah. I always, when I've got a client, I always say add more water to the wet food.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Nothing. That's terrific. At least a tablespoon or a teaspoon to a table, add a little more. And in my opinion, I do not recommend wetting wet or dry food. I know a lot of veterinarians say, just wet the dry food. There is a potential there, if there is mold, to help it grow on the exterior of that food.
Interesting.
If the cat does not eat it immediately and it sits there and then they come back to it, potential for that is a risk.
The best water fountain I have ever seen, and I have one, I could even show it to you because it's right behind me, is called Brook Fountain. brookfountain.com. It is all glass, entirely glass, 100% glass. There are no nooks and crannies for junk to get caught in. It's a smooth bowl with a smooth glass top and a smooth glass tube, and it comes with its own brush. And it is the easiest thing to clean, and it is super quiet. I should work for the company.
Brook Fountain, if you'd like to sponsor the Shelter Cats podcast, we are open to that.
Terry, I'd
That's
like
so
to go back. Can I go back a little bit? I'm
sure.
sorry about the wet food. I had a question I've been wanting to ask. Now, how much wet food do you recommend, like per meal? So I currently they have breakfast, they have dinner, and I do leave the hard food out for them during the day. But right now they have breakfast, they have dinner, and usually for breakfast, for each meal, what I'll do is like a scoop, like a heaping kind of tablespoon of food per cat per meal.
Okay.
Is that like within? And I have one full-grown cat. She's about 15 or so, and then my kitten is not even a year old yet. But again, they swap bowls, so they're eating until they don't feel like eating anymore.
It really comes down to calorie counts here, because we have to count the dry food and how much dry food are they eating a day. So is that a quarter of a cup, do you think, per cat? It depends on what. Most dry foods anywhere are probably around 400 kcals per cup. So let's say they're eating is let's say 100 calories just in dry food. And then you have to take the canned food and figure out the amount or what the cat's caloric need is. And then you weigh that out. So it's not just, oh, well, that sounds like I have two people tell me, oh, I just feed a handful of food. Well, my hand is different than your hand.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to taking the weight of your cat. So if we take a 10-pound cat, the average is 200 calories a day. That it can be 180 to 200. If your cats are, let's say, getting 100 calories in dry food, then 40 calories at each meal is going to get you to 180 calories. And I can tell you in most experiences, a good heaping tablespoon of a pate food is probably going to hit 40 to 50 calories. Does that help?
It does. No, it really does.
Yeah.
Again, this is one of those things I've gone back and forth with over the years where, I used to either give a whole can or I'd give a half can or whatever. And then actually after meeting Dan and him saying that he gives his cats per meal a spoonful, I was like, oh my God, I'm really overfeeding my cats. Maybe I should cut that down. So I've broken it down to, like I said, that, the heaping tablespoon. It's still a decent amount of food that they're getting, but it's
I've done I do the tablespoon as well,
or
like a quarter of a can. I do that as well.
I would rather see you feed a can a day, which is most canned foods are around 100, and they can be about 150 calories, I think, and they make up the difference in the kibble. And when you do that, put it in a puzzle or throw it or give it as a treat before bedtime so that you're shifting. You're adding more of the moisture that helps the kidneys, helps the digestion, helps the urinary tract, and still gets them that little treat that they like. I know I'm lecturing. I'm sorry.
No,
we need it.
That's the kind of information that I need, because it's,
Michelle,
you go back and forth so much with different conflicting things. So
my favorite thing to do when kind of talking about how much food is right, and Terry is absolutely spot on, in terms of how we calculate calories, but there's a backup device. It's called a digital baby scale. And if you weigh your cat once a week and keep a logbook, and you see that he's gaining an ounce, you never see an ounce gain with the naked eye, right? If he's gaining 1 ounce a month and you have successive weights where they're trending in the same direction, that's 12 ounces a year. It's, better part of a pound he's going to put on. So you can gauge where your cat's headed. It also can help you with weight loss, unintentional weight loss as a disease process, as part of a disease process.
Right.
Terrific. There is one of the things that I read or I've used, 10 pieces of kibble a day, extra pieces of kibble a day, the cat will gain a pound in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And Terry and I had a conversation about my somewhat rotund IBD cat, Cricket, who I'm always afraid of her losing weight, because when IBD gets serious, they tend to start losing weight. So I've always been protective of her weight, but we really, needed to kind of get that under control. And Terry and I had a conversation, and we've been reducing her access to some of her dry food, the dry food that she likes best. We have 2 different types because of medical issues. And I can tell you, having tracked her weight, that we are currently holding steady. We have not gained. So we're on the cusp of loss.
Yay!
That's awesome. Go cricket.
Now, if I could just figure out to do that with one of my own. He's got me well trained. Now, he gets canned food, but he still needs to lose an ounce or so.
That's right. Terri, how many cats do you have right now?
I just have 2.
You have 2. Any dogs?
No. We lost our lab 2 years ago. 3 years ago now. No. She was she worked with me at my store. She was the greeter. And when I closed the store, she stopped going to work. She wouldn't even go with me when I closed the store. Like, tried to clean out everything. She flat out refused, and she died 2 months later.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was like, that was my job. I'm done. Moving on. So she has another journey somewhere.
But Terri, we're just going to have you on multiple times. There's just so many topics. I'm going to figure out a way to announce to my 6 cats they may start having less dry food. It sounds like I'm going to research raw food, so you and I may talk some more. I'm going to leave you, before I mention websites again, before Stephen yells at me. I'm going to leave you with a funny story about my first shelter cat, Tyler. Michelle's heard this story 3 times. I'm very sorry, Michelle. You have to hear it again. My first cat, Tyler, liked vanilla ice cream. He liked Cool Whip. He liked white rice. And one time he got drunk off of Bananas Foster. I had a bunch of friends over. I'm sorry, Michelle. I had a bunch of friends over years ago. He died 10 years ago. And for some reason, one of them offered to make Bananas Foster. So she brought all the ingredients, and she slaved over it for a while. And there's a big pot of Bananas Foster on the stove. And I've always let my cats jump on the kitchen counter, the kitchen table. They'll sit with me, and when I eat, I've always allowed that. I've never prevented my cats from jumping anywhere. And we were all just hanging out, and all of a sudden I hear her go, "What is your cat doing?" And Tyler, this cat, had his face in the pot of the Bananas Foster, and he was licking the gravy or the sauce to the Bananas Foster. And apparently he'd been doing that for a while, because he stopped. He kind of like, this is some good shit, man. He jumped down off the counter. He staggered a little, so I guess the rum and the Bananas Foster got to him.
Yes.
He kind of staggered off, and he must have slept for about 48 hours straight. And I was terrified that he had poisoned himself, or there was something bad. I was like, "What is it, Bananas Foster? What the hell did I do? I may have just killed my cat." It turned out he got a little buzzed, and he was fine.
Dan, on that subject, I know we're short on time, but maybe we could ask Terri to just go through some of the foods you should never allow your cat to have contact with, like the onion family as an example.
And Tucker is here. Say hi to Tucker.
Yeah, hi, Tucker. Yes, onions, garlic. A little bit of garlic we use, but we're talking lots of garlic can cause an anemia. There's a whole range. And I think I might even have it listed on my website on things to be very careful of.
Grapes? I don't know. Is that a dog?
Yeah, grapes, raisins. I think even with cats, we have to be a little careful of. I'm kind of drawing a blank here. Apologize. It's the biggest ones that, like the onions and those sort of things, and be careful of it when it's in food. For instance, I often tell people, if their cat's not eating, try baby food. Make sure that you're using the baby food that doesn't have onion in it for flavoring.
Xylitol,
yes,
chocolate, alcohol, obviously. Lilies as a flower are very dangerous.
I'm sorry?
Lilies, the flower.
Yeah.
It's not a food, but lilies should not be in your home.
Oh, especially this time of year. I don't understand why florists don't try to dissuade people. That is just such a health risk for so many cats at this time of the year. Just the pollen can be a problem for them.
The whole plant.
Yeah.
I have no plants. I've never been able to keep a plant, so my guys are fine. That same cat, and then we will end. That same cat used to pee at my mother's plants in the house because I was still living at home at the time when I adopted him. And she had these big trees, and he would pee in the plants. And the vet recommended to put the little white pebbles in the soil. Then he would just pee in the white pebbles, which turned yellow.
Yeah.
And all the trees died, and we basically lost the battle because he just hated those trees. He had a vendetta against those trees.
I am also a plant mom. I'm a cat mom and a plant mom. And the struggle is real. Especially since I got this little kitten last year. She is the most kitten of kittens I've ever had. And I have several plants have sacrificed. Several plants had they gave their all for this kitten.
Have you grown things for her, like the catnip or for?
No, I haven't done that yet.
Grasses, things. Try that. I mean, cats really do, especially the grasses, wheatgrass, those sort of things are really great for cats. They like the taste, the antioxidants. Catnip is a really good, not only makes them high, but especially dried catnip, if they eat it, it's good for their GI tract. It's actually very settling for their GI tract.
Cricket gets a lot of catnip. She even has a part of the apartment we call the catnip area. When she goes there and flops over, I know she wants it. Very interesting study on catnip. I'll be very fast. It shows that it is a mosquito repellent.
Yes,
and that cats who roll in catnip are less likely to get mosquito-borne diseases.
Yeah. There's actually several companies that use it because it's been shown to be just as effective or more effective than DEET. So there are several companies that use it as a preventative. One last thought I'd like to add is that, one of the things that I remember when I had my store, I had clients coming in and their veterinarian would tell them that the cat's digestive tract has evolved and can eat the foods that are available now. Your cat's digestive tract is the same as it was centuries ago. It is not modernized. Cats have really been only, quote, domesticated since the 1960s in a way. Those was when we brought them inside. Their gut has not changed in 60 years. So we really need to recognize how they lived. Up until then, how many people would feed them, but they would also go outside and hunt. So they were getting a lot of the nutrients that they were eating outside, and we were just kind of giving them dessert, really.
It's a very good point. TerriGrow.com. You do consultations, you do lectures, you do you set up diets. This has been a fascinating eye-opener for me. We'll definitely need to have you on again multiple times.
Loved it.
Terri, thank you so much. Once again, TerriGrow.com. And for Stephen, CatBehaviorHelp.com. And Michelle is the author of the book, The Farty Feline. Our cat Delilah used to have a gas problem. That's how Michelle became our co-host, because I thought it was funny as hell. And her book, The Farty Feline, is available on Amazon, right, Michelle?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for having me. I've enjoyed it. I hope I could talk for hours about cat nutrition and cats. I like to see that they are getting more awareness of what's going on and how we can better care for them. Thank you all.
Yeah, and it sounds like the education in terms of cat nutrition has a long way to go. So we appreciate having people like you, Terri Grow. One more time, TerriGrow.com. And this has been episode 61, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.